Hello, good evening. Thank you for coming to tonight's event. This has an illustrious history of political talks. In the past, the Market Hall is a cinema. Tony Benn stood on our stage and talked at the May Day parades. Michael Foot, Jeremy Corbyn, the current leader of the Labour Party, and various others, including Diane Abbott. And it's great to bring that back to a superb venue like this and bring political oration back into the realm of Brynmawr. The gentleman in question this evening is a political firebrand. Firebrands always divide opinion, but no one can dispute the man's oration skills, or the fact he's represented 4 different constituencies as an MP, and now he's done this wonderful piece of work on Tony Blair. So please, a warm welcome for George Galloway.
Thank you very much indeed. I had no idea I was treading in such illustrious footsteps. I first teamed up as an apprentice with Tony Benn, God rest his soul, in 1975 in the European Union referendum, or the Common Market referendum at that time. I first met Mr. Foot, God rest his soul, in 1979 when I was involved in early discussions about his running for the leadership of the Labour Party, and Jeremy Corbyn has been my friend for 40 years. So I don't feel that I'm on strange terrain, even though this is the oldest and highest cinema in England and Wales, and that's I think something to be proud of, and I'm very grateful to the management for putting this show on tonight. I'm going to speak in the Q&A session afterwards at more length, so I'll just confine myself to 3 quick points, if I may. The first is that this film will make you laugh. I know that because I've sat through quite a few showings now, and I even know when you're going to laugh. It will, secondly, make you at least want to cry, and if you didn't want to cry, watching what you're about to see, there would be something wrong with you. And thirdly, and this is more a hope than a certainty, I hope it will leave you feeling very angry. Angry at what was done in our name, angry at the way that a small clique of people seized control of Britain in a kind of coup, a kind of Bonapartist coup, riding roughshod over the constitution that we actually don't have, riding roughshod over any notion of truth and justice, silencing all opposition, expelling those who spoke against them, like me and others. And so nobody should imagine that this is history. This is all still happening. In fact, if you are watching Parliament today, it might very well be about to start in real terms all over again. The country is being marched into a confrontation over Syria with Russia. Imagine, we're going to fight Russia now. The Queen doesn't have enough soldiers to guard Buckingham Palace, but we're going to fight Russia. We've got an aircraft carrier with no airplanes on it, but we're going to fight Russia. We can't pay our national electricity bills. Our pensioners are getting ready to shiver through another cold winter, deciding whether to eat or whether to have heat, but we're going to fight Russia. Tony Blair and the mindset that he represents is not dead. Neither is this kicking a man when he's down. Tony Blair is not down. As a matter of fact, he's £100 million up £100 million in 8 years. When he left Parliament, his wife complained to all who would listen, including me, saying that they now had no house. Well, now they have 34 houses. And that's just in Britain. He's not down, as Jeremy Corbyn learns every hour of every day. And the hell that has become the Labour Party over the last 12 months is directly related to these events and these issues that you're going to be seeing and we'll be talking about afterwards. It was kick-started by crowdfunding, and if there's anyone here who was one of the funders, then I take my hat off to you, because without your start we could not have finished. It would not have finished if I hadn't sold my house to pay for it, and so I do take my hat off to my good wife who supported me in that fateful decision. We're not homeless, we're not like the Blairs, but we are renting. So if you're one of the 5,000 people who donated however small an amount to get this film started, I'm deeply grateful to you. It has just been exhibited at the Vancouver International Film Festival. We're about to exhibit it at the Hof International Film Festival in Germany. It has played all over Britain and Ireland. A Scandinavian distributor has just taken it and is now translating it into the Scandinavian languages. It is beginning to spread, and not just here, but across the world. As well it might, because it isn't history. We're living it now, and I'll explain more after the film as to what I mean by that. Julian, thanks for bringing me here. The drive here, you're probably all used to it, but it's quite breathtaking, you know. It's a fantastically beautiful place that you are living in. I can't say I enjoyed my chips much from the Golden Eagle. You need a better chipper. But thanks very much indeed for coming, and we'll talk after the show. Thank you.
Okay, can we have another round of applause for George, please? So we'll take some questions now. So if you put your hand up, I'll come to you with the microphone, and then I'll bring the microphone back to George to answer your question. So could you put your hands up? Has anyone got any questions? There was one direct in the first row.
Hi George, welcome to Wales.
Thank you.
In the process of researching the film, did you think there was a point at which Tony Blair became a psychopath? Was it the Iraq War, or do you think he's always been one?
Well, I'm not really qualified to answer that. I always thought he was a wrong 'un from the moment that I saw him. I entered Parliament in 87, he in 83. I was dimly aware of him before I got there, but only as Gordon Brown's amanuensis, his apprentice. And that's how Gordon Brown saw it too. very naively. And then upon the death of John Smith, I saw him leap into action to basically politically murder his flatmate, the man who he shared an office with and who had every reason to expect was his supporter. And so from that moment on, I knew that it would not end well. But I had no idea just how badly it would end. I knew that he would murder the idea of Labour here in the South Wales Valley, or like me from the Central Belt. In Scotland we had an idea of Labour. We needed Labour. Without Labour we had nothing to defend us. And I knew that he would destroy that, and indeed he did. He may not have succeeded in actually killing the Labour Party, though the jury's out on that, but it was certainly murderous intent and wounding with an intent to kill. I agree with Matthew Norman in the film. I think that Blair had a messianic character of imagining that someone, God maybe, had given him a duty, a responsibility even, to do the kind of things that he had done. And I think that that messianic streak in his character was definitely brought out in the Yugoslav war. I saw it with my own eyes happening. Claire Short couldn't agree with that because she had supported the Yugoslav war. She says she dates it later to the 9/11 events, but I saw it develop during the Yugoslav war, and he grew into a monster. I must tell you, he was and is, although it's some time since I spoke to him. I don't intend to speak to him again until I'm a witness at his trial in The Hague. But the last time I spoke to him, he had developed, this was just a couple of weeks before the war, he had developed a simply monstrous persona, so that I stopped him in the library corridor, outside the gentleman's lavatory to be precise. He was accompanied, as always, by Alistair Campbell, who, oddly for him, had to be the peacemaker on that occasion, otherwise they would have led to blood. So heated did the argument become. But I accused him there. I don't actually know why I accused him of this, because I don't actually believe it. I don't agree with the American lady from the former CIA lady that he was Bush's poodle. I believe he was Bush's brain, which was otherwise missing. The president's brain was otherwise missing. So I don't know quite why I said this, but I said to him, "You're doing all this to please this imbecile, Blair?" And he said, "It's worse than that. I really believe it. And if I could," this is a direct verbatim quote, "if I could, there are many other countries that I'd invade." And he rattled them off. They didn't exactly tally with General Wesley Clark's list in the film, but they included some countries that General Clark didn't. For example, Burma. Tony Blair said, "If I could, I would invade Burma." Bizarrely included Zimbabwe also. Just what Africa needed, a new white invasion. But he said, "I would invade Burma if I could." And then, within 2 years of leaving office, Tony Blair was actually working for the Burmese dictatorship as a consultant. So he was ready to invade it until they wrote him a check to actually work for them. So, I mean, I don't want to get all religious. I know we're in the valleys. But I see him as quite a demonic figure. That may just be me. Demonic or not, he has dragged us into such a dangerous place. We could have shown things about ISIS and Al-Qaeda and so on, which we didn't. I mean, all these people that were lined up on the beach, for example, they all had their throats cut and their heads cut off. And I have that film. But we didn't. Now, as President Obama says, this came directly from this. And that wasn't Iraq or Syria, that was Libya. That's my next film, by the way, about David Cameron. It's called Pigs. You'll understand why. So it didn't end with Blair, but this era that we're now in is terrifyingly dangerous. Really, horrifically, terrifyingly dangerous. And I hold Blair and Bush responsible for it.
Do we have another question? Hi George. Hi. It's Ian from United Valleys Action Group. We talk to you on Twitter quite often.
Yes.
Nice to see you again. Brilliant film. I've just started my MSc Global Governance, and on the 29th of September I went up to the US Embassy and we met with, one of the diplomats was Jessup Taylor, Department of State for Asia Pacific, and I asked him the question, do you still consider Jabhat al-Nusra to be a moderate group and one of your allies? And he kind of waffled and didn't give me a direct answer. What's your take on how we pick our friends?
Well, it is, of course, part of the poisonous legacy of that era that we've just been watching, that we have made friends with the most horrific allies and had to rebrand them as moderates. And as I referred earlier to the Syria debate in Parliament today, there are not many days that I wish I was back in Parliament, but today was one of them. I really would have liked to have participated in the arguments today. But these Al-Qaeda, ISIS types, although we're told to be very afraid of them, as well we might, when they come here and cut your throat, it's an act of hideous murder. But if they go to Iraq or Syria and carry the same act out there, they're freedom fighters. They're moderate rebels. They're people that we should actually send our own servicemen and women to risk their lives in support. I got trapped in a lift once with William Hague, who was then the Foreign Secretary. Imagine his luck. The lift door opens, I get in, bad enough, but he's only going to the 3rd floor. And then at the 2nd floor, the lift jams. And he has no idea for how long. And I said to him, "You've been wrong before, William. In fact, you've been wrong all your life. But you've never been insane before. And what you're doing in Syria, by arming and funding and backing these head-chopping, heart-eating, crucifying maniacs, is insane. It's insane on 2 levels. First of all, if it succeeds, these people are going to be in power in Damascus, on the Mediterranean, next door to Israel. How's that going to end? And if it fails, all of these madmen are going to come back here. And I said to them, they'll be running around in this building, looking for your head and mine to cut. At which point the lift doors opened and he bolted out, even though it was the wrong floor. And I never had a chance to speak to him since. But wasn't I right? Everything I've said in this answer has already been proven right, and it isn't even over yet. The British security services say that their number one fear is the returning head choppers from Syria that we sent there, called them freedom fighters. Even today they were calling them freedom fighters instead of the devils that they are. So I suppose your diplomat at the US Embassy was embarrassed, as well he might be, because Jabhat al-Nusra is a part of Al-Qaeda. And who knew that Al-Qaeda would be succeeded by something even worse than them? Who knew you could get worse than Al-Qaeda? And it may be the case that even ISIS is not as bad as it's going to get. And the people responsible for it, directly and indirectly, are Blair and Bush and their heirs and successors.
Any more questions? Another question? Oh, wait, okay. Gentleman with the beard.
We're live streaming this, by the way, on Facebook and Periscope, so
Hello there.
there's 60,000 people watching this.
Bloody tell me that.
Sorry, it's the back of your head. My wife's filming it now.
There we are. That's fine. Having heard the description that you've given of the effective degeneration of an already, well, quite frankly, weird politician, Tony Blair, into something which was basically some kind of messiah complex, that seems bad enough, but how in the first place were things permitted in a political party to get that bad, do you think? And secondly, is there a way back? I'm sure there are people in this room of all political persuasions. George would like to hear your words on that. Thank you.
Well, in a way, that's what we used to call, if you're old enough, the $64,000 question. That's why I mentioned at the beginning, we need to feel angry about all this, and not just angry at him, but angry at ourselves. Let's assume for a minute that even if you are no longer, it's quite likely that most people in this hall are from a Labour tradition. I joined the Labour Party when Harold Wilson was the Prime Minister. Today is the anniversary, by the way, of his second victory in 1974, in October 74. But when I joined the Labour Party, Harold Wilson was in his 66 to 70 administration with a landslide victory. By happenstance, I became really quite close to Harold Wilson late in his life, after he had left Downing Street. I used to visit him often. He was succeeded by James Callaghan. Again, I was very friendly with James Callaghan. He was succeeded by Michael Foot. I said earlier, I was one of those that helped to organise the launch of Michael Foot's leadership campaign. He was succeeded by Neil Kinnock. So friendly was I at the time with Neil Kinnock that he had me to stay at his constituency here in South Wales and in his family home in Ealing in London. I could go on, but I think you're getting my drift. I, as someone on the left, had warm relations with Labour leaders on the right. Why? Because they were Labour leaders. They were something called Labour. We had differences, many, many differences, but we were part of a discernible, traceable, definable Labour tradition. Blair represents a complete rupture with that. It's no accident that he changed the party's name, by fiat, by the way. No one voted to change its name to New Labour. They just woke up one morning and it was suddenly New Labour. No one who lived through that period was in any doubt that under Blair there was a qualitative change. It was not more or less of one thing or another. It was something completely different. The whole PFI, privatization, neoliberal economics, neocon foreign policy, love affair with the United States. Harold Wilson resisted all blandishments and all bludgeons from American presidents in refusing to send the British armed forces to Vietnam, for example, and paid a price for it. But this was something completely new and different. So how did we let it happen? After all, he was preceded by a quintessentially Labour man, a very dear friend of mine, John Smith. If John Smith had lived, he would have won the landslide majority in 1997. It's entirely wrong to claim that some Blairite alchemy got the Tories out in 1997. The Tories were heading for defeat when John Smith died. Why then did the Labour Party allow this hijack to take place? And why were they mesmerized for so long, to the extent that here in this constituency, your own Member of Parliament wouldn't have dreamt of coming to watch this film tonight? He still describes himself as a Blairite, representing here the Vice Chairman of the Blairite organisation Progress. You saw on the screen all these people crying, a standing ovation, which isn't even allowed in the House of Commons. Even clapping isn't allowed. The entire House was on its feet, clapping him out, and many of them were crying. I've got to tell you, you'll not like this. Only 3 people in the entire House of Commons, only 3, refused to stand up, refused to applaud as he left. And those 3 were me, Corbyn, and Abbott, that you mentioned earlier. Everybody else was giving him a standing ovation. Why? Standing ovation for what? For killing 1 million people? For sending extremism cascading around the world? For privatizing our public services? Paving the way for Cameron and Osborne to do more and more of the same? Was it because he managed to lose 5 million Labour votes between 1997 and when Labour next went to the polls after he left in 2010? Were they giving him a standing ovation for losing more than half of the Labour Party members? The Labour Party membership halved under Tony Blair. And look at it now, that page has been turned. Put that in your pipe and smoke it, Mr. Local MP. 650,000 members now under Jeremy Corbyn, who is not perfect, by the way, and has made some mistakes, has some weaknesses. But what is he compared to Blair? He's a good and honest man. And isn't that what the country is crying out for? A good and honest man after the trash that we've had, not just him, but the subject of my next film, pigs.
Any more questions? Okay.
Can you ever see Tony Blair being brought to justice?
Gentleman asks what you heard. He's already on his way to court. The Chilcot report provides the evidential basis for potentially hundreds of private prosecutions by bereaved families, the families of British service personnel, and even other victims from elsewhere. The Chilcot report, which of course was very quickly forgotten, not least because a coup against Corbyn was launched a few days before it to helpfully divert our attention, is still there. Whether the press talk about it or Parliament talks about it, it's still there. And in page after page, in millions of words, it provides the basis for those private prosecutions. And they are underway. So I think that Mr. Blair's going to be seeing the inside of a lot of courtrooms over the next months and years. That's the good news. The bad news is you're paying for his defence, because David Cameron already declared that the taxpayer will fund Tony Blair's defence in what might be hundreds of cases. That's not going to be a small sum. And he's already costing us a pretty penny, as you saw in the film. But whether he'll end up in the big court, I happen to think he will. First of all, he's still quite young. Well, I say that because he's older than me. But he's relatively young. He can reasonably look forward to another 20 or 25 years of life. And I think we can get him into the big court by then. And I pray to God that I'm here to see it. And the reason is outlined by Michael Mansfield QC in the film. Because although the launching of aggressive, illegal war is not a crime under the International Criminal Court statutes at the moment, and soon will be, but will not be retroactive. You cannot use it to prosecute a prior offence. There are lots of things that you can prosecute for that were offences at the time that he committed them. And Michael Mansfield talked about several of them. The use of banned weapons, depleted uranium, sometimes compounded by plutonium, a weapon of mass destruction by anybody's reckoning, and causing a cancer epidemic now in Iraq, particularly afflicting children. And you saw some of those in the film. Torture is a crime, was a crime, will always be a crime, and can be prosecuted at the ICC. Extraordinary rendition, the kidnapping of people and taking them to so-called black prisons in so-called black countries where you disappear and are tortured, in many cases to death. These are all crimes under the ICC statutes, and I believe that there is a case against Blair on all of them. No person other than a black African has ever yet been prosecuted at the ICC. People usually shout out at this point, what about Milosevic? He wasn't prosecuted at the ICC. His was the Special Yugoslavs War Crimes Tribunal, and incidentally, some years after his death, he's been found not guilty. The only people who have actually been prosecuted at the ICC are black African small tyrants. None of the big tyrants have yet been there. So it would be good to break that precedent and get one of the big tyrants in the dock. And I believe that it will happen.
Any more questions?
The British press is very right-wing. How, George, do you fare against, and your film fare against that?
Well, again, there's good news, you see. The British press is laughably right-wing. As anyone following the Corbyn story of the last 12 months has been rudely reminded all over again. But therein is the problem for the press. It is laughably right-wing. Everybody knows that it's right-wing. Fewer and fewer people buy the right-wing newspapers, and fewer of them than ever before believe what they find in them, even if they buy them. Some of them are buying them only for the football. Some of them buying them only for the racing. Virtually nobody who buys the press is in any doubt about its political orientation, so they can see it coming. But newspapers are fast going out of business. I'm personally, with all respect to any newspaper men present, I'm personally very happy about that. When the last editor is strangled with the last copy of the Daily Express, I will think it's a great day for freedom. The television market has so utterly changed that a mass audience now is 5 million. There's 65 million of us. When you and I were young, Morecambe and Wise used to get 25 million viewers. Now a huge mega hit in terrestrial TV is 5 million. The market has completely shattered, and there are now hundreds of places to go for information, entertainment, news. Our children, I have very young children. My young children don't ever watch television. They watch the internet. They watch YouTube. They watch videos. They would never dream of doing what you and I used to do and come in from work and sit down and switch on the television and watch it all night and be passive recipients of whatever that TV channel threw at us. That's gone now. That is gone forever. And I argue that ignorance is now a choice. When we were young, we had no choice. We had to take what 2 or 3 television channels gave us, or any one of a group of billionaire newspaper owners gave us. But that's no longer the case. Everybody here is the media. I have more than 1 million followers on social media. This is going out to tens of thousands of people right now, this meeting. We are our own media, and we, each of us, can find the truth. And we can compare and contrast. We can watch Sky News, and we can watch Russia Today, and that's without leaving the Sky platform. If you're surfing online, there are hundreds, thousands of sources of information. So you don't have to accept what the right-wing media is feeding you. If you do, you've made that choice. And I'm glad to say, fewer and fewer people are making that choice. Of course, there's a huge phalanx of tens of millions of people in Britain today who still don't know, who are still not conscious, politically conscious. But there are more people in Britain today politically clued up than there has ever been in the history of this country. As you can see, if you even take a glance at social media, as I do, particularly Twitter, which is fast-moving, faster than any news source, and where the ridiculing of today's debate on Syria is so savage that you just wish there were even more millions of people reading it. Nobody's fooled anymore by these people. So I believe there's reason to be optimistic about that. Rupert Murdoch's going out of business, and he's the most successful. The BBC is going out of business. Hallelujah. The newspapers, none of them are making money. Even the Daily Mail is no longer making money, and that's the most successful of them. The Guardian's begging people for donations. Imagine, it's like the Morning Star. You read an article in the Guardian, if you're stupid enough, and at the bottom it says, donate some money so that the Guardian can keep going. These people are history.
Any more questions, anyway? No? I've got a question just before we tied up. Oh, there's one up there, is there? Ah, a latecomer.
What's the time, by the way? I've got it right back.
Hi there, it's nice to see you, George. I was just wondering if you got any comment on the fact that Tony Blair carried on stealing from the miners' pension fund. And he carried on what the Tories started. It's just disgraceful.
Yeah.
I was just wondering if you've got any small comment to pass on that.
Yeah. It's a good note to end on.
You did your programme or
I've myself been very active now on this question of the miners' pension fund. I'm an honorary member of the National Union of Mine Workers South Wales Area Mardi Lodge, which I have been since 1981. For reasons I'll not go into, I was nearly the MP for the Rhondda. I might have been standing before you now speaking in a Welsh accent, 40 years on or 35 years on, but I'll not bore you with that. But the miners' cause is very important to me. I fought every day of the strike and its aftermath, and the insult that has been added to the enormous injury suffered by mining communities is that a group of workers who actually don't live all that long, sorry to say, because of the hard life underground and the many illnesses and diseases thus contracted, have a vast surplus in their pension fund because they don't draw the pension for long. So instead of using that surplus to make the lives, short as they are, of the miners better, instead of using the surplus to make the lives of their widows better, or even of their communities in which they lived and died better, the governments steal 50%, rising to 80% of the surpluses in the miners' pension fund. It is utterly unprecedented and is the result of, I believe, criminal, I'm saying this word knowing that it's being filmed, I believe a criminal conspiracy to rob the miners of that which is rightfully theirs and their families. It's a conspiracy that involves people who were trustees and who made this deal with the governments. Before Blair, actually, this started before Blair, but it continued throughout the Blair and Brown period. It is one of the great scandals of our time. And I'm going to shock you with the number. My estimation, this is not the one that I showcased on our RT show Sputnik or on my radio show. This is my own further investigations. I believe that £23 billion has been stolen from the miners' pension fund. 23 billion. Can you imagine the difference that that could have made to the lives of the miners in their retirement, the lives of their widows after, the lives of the community in which they live? So you really should turn on to this subject if you haven't already. Maybe some of you are yourselves victims. But if you are hearing about this for the first time, watch my show called Sputnik on RT. Listen to my radio show on Talk Radio and follow the leads, follow the links. And you'll see that this is an issue that's gathering speed and momentum now. And is going to be one of the great campaigns of the next few years. And if we win it, what a difference it would make to places like this. Thank you very much indeed for coming. I really appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you. And a big thanks to Jake, the projectionist, for making it all possible. Thank you.
Once again, George Galloway, thank you very much for coming this evening to this wonderful venue which is run by the Market Hall Cinema and Arts Trust and volunteers. Can we also have a round of applause for the Cinema and Arts Trust and the volunteers, please? It's been an enlightening geopolitical evening. Please look out for more events like this at the Market Hall, and thank you all for coming. Good night.
Oh,